Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast. Presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Josh from MitsuTimes. Today, my guest is the one and only Glenn Wallace. He is the owner and driver of the number 428 powered 2G on our 428 list with a personal best of 11,192 at 132.82 miles per hour. How you doing today, Glenn?
Pretty good. How are you, man?
I'm great, man. Thank you so much for inviting me here to your beautiful shop, Exigent Solutions, so we can sit down and do this. I really appreciate it. It adds a whole nother element to these podcasts.
Yeah, it's a little more of a personal touch.
Exactly, yeah. So why don't you tell us about the setup on your car as it sits right now?
So right now, it's pretty basic. It's a 2.4-liter piston rod motor. I think it's JD's and Eagles or something. I don't really remember. It's been 8 years since I put that motor together. Stock valve head, I think that's springs and cams, and it's an HX35. And the whole show's ran with an M-Tron KV8 ECU.
You're paving a whole different direction from anyone else in the 428 world.
Yeah, so we use the M-Tron in our shop drag car and a lot of the builds that we do, and I really wanted to, get away from the mega sport in that car. It runs the car just fine. It's the ECU, but it's very outdated. Things like drive-by-wire and traction control and stuff like that are much more polished and more modern ECU. And with some of the stuff that we're doing, having a car that's relatively low power and a little bit cheaper to test things on is kind of beneficial. So, it's a lot easier for me to go out and make a race in front of the shop to test out a traction control strategy that I want to try instead of loading up the shop Evo 10 and going down to the track and putting methanol in it. It's a lot less of a thing to try something out, and you can do a lot of R&D that way. And I've been working with them closely on some features that are coming out in the firmware they just released and stuff like that. So using that as a learning tool has been really beneficial in getting our builds and shop parts and stuff like that up to a higher level of quality.
Yeah, heck yeah. So, Glenn, before we even move on, I wanted to ask / kind of give you a plug here. If anyone out there is looking to push the 428 and they want to find out more about this M-Tron, can they hit you up and possibly work their way to get their build M-Tron powered?
Yeah, absolutely. We helped M-Tron get the trigger pattern figured out for these, so it's it's not plug and play, so there's no harness for that yet. But use all stock triggers and the weird stuff. And you can absolutely get that squared away. It's just not a stage. We can take a little time to sit down and talk about it, stuff like that, and go from there.
We're seeing, I'm sure you see it, probably more than I do, but we're seeing more serious 428 builds come forward, and they all have kind of the same question, like, hey, I'm kind of tapped out on Mega Squirt. Like you said, it's a great, ECU choice, but it's kind of like, where do I go from here now?
Right, and 15 years ago, we're putting an FMU and an SAFC on this thing to kind of figure it out, or Megasport like one at the time. And, that was the only option you had, and then somewhere in the middle there, I feel like the platform kind of lost some popularity. Less people were doing stuff with them, or they were just going off of the, if it works kind of thing, but it's not right.
Right.
So, I feel like it kind of lost some traction, and there's not a lot of ECUs that support that trigger pattern. It's very unique, and so like a Haltech or any of those other ECUs are going to be put a custom trigger setup on it and all this other work that a lot of these guys just don't want to do.
Yeah.
So I like the ECU. We were using it in Ryan's car all year last year, and I got familiar with it. And over the winter, I reached out and I'm like, hey, can we add this trigger pattern? And, I fully expected to get a response back. It was like, no, we don't really do that. And they're like, yeah, the more trigger patterns we can add to the ECU, the better we can sell the ECU.
Yeah.
So they were totally on board right from the hit. And, I had a harebrained idea to try something out. So I'm like, I want to see if they'll do it. And they did. So it's been really good to work with them on that.
Yeah. That's a killer option for a vastly unloved platform.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Glenn, what was it that made you choose the 428 platform in the first place? Because we see a lot of people that I interview on this podcast, it kind of is the same story. They started out 428, that was maybe their first DSM, and then they moved on to something 4G63 powered. So, what is it that's made you stick to this?
So, yeah, that's usually the thing. People get a 428 car and they're like, I want to go faster. And then everybody's response on the internet, on any of the forums, was like, sell it and buy a car. And sure, if you can afford to do that, that might be a opinionally better option. But, my dad had one when I was growing up. And it was a 428 car, and he turbocharged it and did all that other stuff I was talking about, CFC and FMU and all this stuff. And I think his car made like high 300. It wasn't anything wild. It was like a big 16G or a Super 20G or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe like a Disco Potato or something like that. It was like early 2000 stuff, And he, I learned a lot about working on cars, working with him in the garage on that thing, and he eventually sold it and bought an Evo, and I was doing from the start. But one of his buddies from QGNT.com was getting ready to move out to California and couldn't take his car with him. He's like, it's been sitting for 5 years for a suspension issue, haven't had time to work on it. And I'm like, I'll absolutely take it.
Yeah.
First car, I drove to college and all sorts of stuff, and I just kind of stuck with it because it's different. Not a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
So certainly it would have been easier to make 500 horsepower out of a 4063, but at the time, I had the car and I wasn't interested in finding a 40 car because, back in early 2010s, they were a lot more expensive than a 428 car. So
I think even now, Glenn, we're seeing, we could probably leave here and go find a 428 car for a couple $1,000, whereas if we're going to find a running and driving 4G car, we're looking at probably close to 10 grand.
Absolutely, and I've got a couple 4G cars here in the shop for various things, and they're really clapped out. A lot of people have had their hands in there and stuff like that, and I see that a lot. And you can go pick up a 100% low stock 428 and start from scratch, which is in my mind in some ways a lot better. You're not trying to figure out what somebody else did. The reason that you're having a problem, but you can I see them all the time on Facebook Marketplace for like $1,500 with 100,000 miles on them, and got a bad rod there or something like that. But it's a perfect start, and it's relatively clean shell, and if there's a will, there's a way. Kind of thing. So,
and I kind of want to go back to what you said a minute ago, Glenn, where you could have went out and built a 500 horsepower 4G car, and you didn't at the time, but you have now. Your Evo is more than capable, but you've also stuck to this 428 car at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, like, it's a little bit sentimental, My dad always, growing up, my dad had one, and, it was my first car that I bought with my own money out of high school and stuff like that, so it's like, that's my car. All the other cars that I've had since then have been like, oh, yeah, whatever, car, whatever, sell that, and buy a Evo, and I still go to car meets with the Evo and stuff, and people are like, oh, is that so-and-so's old car? I'm like, no, it's my car now, but yes, it is. But nobody says that about my place, because, I've had that car for 10 years now, and it's been my car. I bought it from stock. It was my buddy's daily driver. So, it's kind of been a huge learning tool for me, and I've used that car for a lot of development stuff that, it's kind of one of those, you can't figure it out, but you're in there doing it.
Yeah.
So,
It's part of you now.
right. I've rewired the whole car front to back 4 times, playing with different versions of Megasport and now M-Tron.
Yeah.
And, so like there's a little bit of that blood, sweat, and tears kind of thing in there. And
For sure.
If it blows up, I'll put something else in it, or build another 428 for it, or something, but I don't think I'll ever get rid of the car.
Yeah. So you said the car had some suspension issues when you got it. It was, other than that, it was pretty much bone stock, pretty clean interior.
Yeah, it was 100% stock. Like, still had the stock airbox on it. Had lowering springs and 18s on it, and I think maybe a stereo in it. And that was like all that was done to the car when I bought it. 92,000 miles, something like that. Completely stock, great little, back and forth to work thing.
Yeah, but that's what you was looking for at the time.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
It's exactly what I needed. And, I graduated and drove the car all summer to work and started college. And then immediately bought a MegaSport for the car. I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to figure out how to make this thing faster. And it's downhill from there.
So I know you probably did because your dad had one and his was turbocharged. Did you have any goals for the car after you picked it up?
Yeah, originally my goal was just to make 300 horsepower. I wanted to make 300 horsepower and drive the car around. I wanted a fun street car that was, still drivable and stuff like that. And clearly I went wrong somewhere and
went over the rails
and overshot just a little bit on that. So I think the big thing was I bought an EVO8 turbo for it. I was like, yeah, I can make 300 horsepower of this thing. And I started looking at it and found out that it had a cracked exhaust housing. And I ended up buying like a 57 trim or something for the car. And I was like, yeah,
that was a slippery slope.
Yeah, it was just like immediately right off the deep end.
So Glenn, I usually ask the 4G, the 4B guys, what different setups have they had in it so that people out there listening can get a judge of, well, if he ran that with this setup, then maybe I could run that. But I want to talk to you about what different setups you've had in this car over the years that have really worked out well. That way, if somebody out there is looking to turbocharge their 428 but not get too crazy, maybe they could have a similar setup.
Yeah, so when I did MegaSport first off, I guess we can do the first not stock setup. It was bone stock 2-liter NA with an exhaust and a MegaSport. That's all that was done to it, maybe like coil air intake or something like that. And, I just started teaching myself how to tune with it and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. But it was going like 140 horsepower, something like that. Never had it on a dyno in that configuration or anything like that. While I was doing that, I was building this 2.4-liter motor at the same time.
Okay.
So the car's always had this 2.4 swap in it. That seems to work pretty well. It's easier to find parts for because it shares a lot of the same architecture with the SRT4 stuff. Pistons, rods, bearings, studs, all that's a lot easier to get for the 2.4 stuff, which is why I went with that.
Okay.
Even 10 years ago when I started doing this build, the 2-liter parts were getting a little harder to find.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a platform popularity kind of thing.
Right,
Nobody's buying main studs for 428 anymore.
They're not going to
stop making
right.
it. So, I'm sure that if I made some phone calls, I could get some parts now, but 10 years ago I couldn't.
Right.
So I just went with a 2.4-liter. And the first setup on that was I think I bought a 57 trim from Justin Whitesell, and a log manifold and a eBay wastegate, 8 pounds of boost, and tuning on the MegaSport. And I think I had like some 800 cc injectors in there, something like that, and just fiddled around with it and played around with that setup. I don't know that I ever went to the track with that setup. And then I got a HX35 from what you worked in Dodge the other day.
Oh.
He pulled one off the truck, and I ordered a bullseye housing for it, T3 housing, and built a manifold for it, and then that setup was on the car for a long time. I think I went like low 12s with that setup, maybe.
Wow.
Mid 12s, something like that. And the one time I had that on the dynos, I don't even remember what brand it was. It was one of those portable trailer dynos.
Okay.
Had the track, it made like 400 of the tire, like 25 pounds or something like that. And it was a pretty solid little setup. I had a lot of fun driving that around on the street. I put a lot of miles on the car like that. Multiple trips to the shootout and stuff like that. And it was really well ironed out. And I feel like it lived forever at that power level. And it was very solid, very fun. And, especially back then with the traction control strategies that were available and stuff. Like, it was just, that was about the limit that was going to drive with that car on street tires.
Just burn them off.
Right. After that, I chopped the whole front of the car off, started doing 2 front ends, bought a 62 ball bearing. Like, I'm going to go for the record. That was, after I had enough fun and got bored of 400 horsepower, I was like, I'm going to go for the record. Yeah. Why not? And, Bill Hahn did it on the 20G with nitrous, so certainly a 62 is going to get you
should
there.
be able to do it, yeah.
So that year in the winter, I put 62 on the car, tubed the front end, put plates in the transmission, checked all the boxes, twin disc clutch, everything.
Mm-hmm.
and got the car together and put it on P16 and made 540 wheel horsepower on Busher's dyno at like 40 pound boost. And back then, I still didn't know a whole lot about tuning. So, I was still learning here. Right? So this was probably 6 years ago. About 6 years ago. And, there were a couple iterations of tuning on that. Like, I put a car down to 1119. It worked pretty good, but I think I put 11 transmissions in the car.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so it turned into this thing where I was like, making the power. I mean, the car is tracked as high as 136 or 137, I think. So it was like making enough power to do what I wanted to do, but I couldn't get the trans to live on the bottom end of the track without any power management. And I was just, you're slightly limited in power management on the race course. So I was just pouring everything I had at it. Boost by gear is about as good as I got on that.
Yeah.
And a little bit of an ignition retard offline. And, I sort of learned about how power management stuff works a little bit. And I think if I had to do it again today, it'd be a lot different. On the same ECU, I'd set it up a lot differently to try to get that to work. But, no lift shift everywhere. It got expensive fast. D16s, $25 a gallon.
Oh, yeah.
Transmissions are,
Expensive.
$200 a piece for the neon transmission that I run in that car, and with a different final drive. And
When you're buying 11 of them,
I spent probably $6 or $7 grand just on 15 passes that year, and I mean it got me to where I am on the list, but it kind of turned into a thing where it wasn't fun anymore. So the car made all this power, and I'd drive it to a Cars and Coffee like once a year, and I think the last year that had the 6260 I put 16 miles on the car all year.
Wow.
Like I drove it to fucking work one day.
And that was it.
So it stopped being fun. It just sat in my driveway and all that. I'm like, I gotta do something about this. It's not fun anymore. I don't want to keep putting transmissions in it every time I drive it. What am I gonna do? And I was like looking back, I'm like, I know a lot more about tuning now. There's a lot more stuff. Like I took like a 3-year break from the car. It literally sat in my yard for 3 years. I didn't do anything with it. That's all Brian and I were building up the business and stuff like that. And I just didn't have time to work on it. And I was playing with my ego.
Wasn't a priority, yeah.
It was there if I was bored, kind of thing. And I was like, I got to do something with this. And the Evo Day at Tail of the Dragon was coming up, and my Evo was broken. And I'm like, well, take my 2G. That thing's never left me stranded. I mean, other than the racetrack and transmission, but it always towed it to the track, so that didn't really count. As a street car, it never left me stranded. So I'm like, I could do that. And, at that point, I'd already taken the 6262 off and sold that to a buddy, and he put it on his Evo. And I'm like, well, I need to find a turbo for this thing. What am I going to put on it? And I went back to the HS35. They're super cheap, and I bought another housing for it, and I bought an eBay HX35. I'm like, this is going to be just fine for this car.
Super durable.
Yeah, and at that point, still had base sport on it, so I literally just loaded up my HX35 tune from 4 years ago, tossed it in there, and was like, all right, cool. But now I own a dyno.
Yeah.
So I put it on the dyno and made some changes and figured out, hey, this car would have made a lot more power if I knew what I knew now back then. Like, looking back at some old tunes that I, when I was first trying to figure this stuff out before I did any, classes or any like formal training or really had a tool to figure stuff out correctly. Some of that stuff was kind of rough. I'm like, oh man, this is embarrassing.
Can't believe I did this.
So I got the car back together and it made 400 horsepower on wastegate instead of 25 pounds. So 8 less pounds of boost and making the same power that it used to. So,
that tells the story right there.
Right. So figuring some stuff out on that, and I'm like, all right, cool. Pump gas car, Mega Sport, like, take it down to the Dragon and I'll enjoy it. And I had nothing but problems the entire time down there. Throttle return spring kept coming off and and all sorts of stuff. And I just, it was still a fun trip. The car, other than the throttle spring and I think I had a little oil leak issue or something like that. The car was flawless the rest of the time. I'm like, all right, I think I can fix a couple things and turn this back into a street car for real and just drive the thing around and enjoy it. And we came back and I parked it for the winter, and that's when I started talking to the guys in Amazon about stuff because we were using it in Ryan's car.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm like, I'd really love to put driving a wire on this car. I'd really love to add cruise control and you know, have some creature comforts and traction control and stuff like that would make this thing a lot more fun to drive on the street.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, let's do it. Got all that squared away. Put it on the dyno. Get the same power on gasoline gate. Like, all right, cool. But now I can do flex fuel well and you know, figure that stuff out. So I put ethanol in the car for the first time ever. And made 520 horsepower, which I think is on the dyno board now. Yep. And, you know, I didn't know what an H635 would make. I've never turned one up. I've never, the couple cars that I've done with an H635 here have always been like limited by the motor or something like that. So I like have a setup that I can see what they make, and I did some research, and that's about what an HX35 will make on a 4D. So I think it's a potent platform.
Yeah.
So,
well, but I mean, we were kind of talking offline before, but I think, you know, we see these 500, 400 horsepower 428s, but they're limited by the trans from what I'm gathering.
Absolutely. They 100% are, and anybody that tells you different is lying. We did a car for a guy. He heard that we do mega squirts on 428 cars, and he's like, I want you guys to install one. It was a Fast and Furious replica car. Mm-hmm. The whole 9 yards. You know, everything's green and chrome and terrible. And I tuned the car. He had an H635 on it, but he only had like some 615 injectors or something like that. 700. He's like, those some small injectors. We ran out of fuel on the dyno. They gave him the car back. I'm like, you are going to break transmission. Car makes some torque, power, you're going to break transmissions. It's like, what do you suggest I do to avoid that? I'm like, don't be on it. And no more than 2 weeks later, he messages us. He's like, so I think I broke the transmission.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, I told you. And I told him to go to the junkyard and get another one and stuff it in there. And
there really is no way around it.
There's a couple things you can do inside that help, for sure. And there's a couple things that I've figured out that help with fluid. I overfill mine. I mix a couple of different fluids in there. Have my own little cocktail.
Yeah.
To help with that, and you know, it makes them last a little bit longer, but there's not really a whole lot you can do.
Right.
The biggest thing there is managing things like wheel hop and stuff like that, so they tear stuff up. The sync bros seem to be okay. They have a problem with overextending third gear shift forks and bending shift rails. I've seen a couple guys that take them apart and weld a little sleeve on the shift rail so it has a hard stop at third gear now. I haven't done that yet, but I haven't had a reason to take the trans part in the car for, you know, the last 5 years. So I stopped breaking a bunch of them and put one in the car that I threw together just so the car would move around, and it's been a pretty solid little transmission, and I just left that one alone.
Heck yeah.
And stopped racing the car. So I wish there was more trans options, but I think a lot of it comes down to managing power and stuff like that, and that's where, you know, switching to Mtron really shines. Like, I'm putting the same horsepower was through the car with the 62 with more torque.
Yeah. But now you can feed it in.
Right, I can feed it in different, and I can limit power in certain gears and stuff like that, and I don't have a problem where the car starts spinning so bad that it's just like hopping all over the place and shattering gears, which is 100% the problem when I was drag racing the car. So,
which is a common problem on Evos too, we should point out.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's part of the reason that we had so much success with, you know, Ryan's Evo 10 last year on a stock transmission is because we were, you know, we had a really cool shift strategy that was rev matching shifts instead of just cutting and stuff like that on the Mtron that was just really helping us limit power input to the transmission and shock loading that trans so that it would stay together.
Okay.
This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by the Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo Club. The Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo Club is a club of 2008 and up Lancer owners who have or are interested in turbocharging their Lancers. There's also Ralliart and Evo owners as well. The Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo Club is a gold mine of technical knowledge, helpful resources, and expert information for safely and successfully adding a turbocharger to your Lancer. It is without a doubt one of the coolest and largest Facebook Mitsubishi communities with nearly 6,000 members from all over the planet. They share builds, time slips, dyno sheets, and there's even a classified group for you to find parts for your Lancer. Join the club on Facebook at Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo Club and give them a follow on Instagram.
So, Glenn, I want to talk about what it took for you to run 11s, because maybe there's someone out there, I don't know what the 428 runs stock. I don't want 428 guys to come after me.
15 or something.
15,
It's
that's
low.
well, I mean, that makes sense. But, you know, a 4-second improvement is huge.
Oh, yeah.
So if I'm out there with a 428 and I want to run an 11, that's my goal. I don't want to break the record. What do I need to do?
Well, I think it comes down to power management. I think that, you know, the car is light enough to do it with 400 horsepower. I bet. You know, a 500 horsepower car on our dyno tracks 135 miles an hour, and 135 miles an hour is mid-10 track speed all day long.
Yeah.
You can get it out of the hole. So it really comes down to power management and stuff. You know, you're going to need a belt motor. The stock motors and those do not hold up to boost at all. And you're going to need some sort of engine management that can let you feed in power correctly so you can get the car online, and then suspension stuff to get the car to actually work.
I know you said, I don't want to cut you off, Glenn, but you said that the engines don't hold up to boost at all. I know there's always been a myth or a rumor, I guess would be a better word, that 8 PSI is the max on stock. And have you learned that to be true?
Yes, I would say so. But that being said, there's a huge difference in 8 PSI from a little T25 and 8 PSI from a CC262 or something like that.
Right.
So, you know, 250 horsepower is probably about the limit of what the throttle will handle.
Okay.
Just from, you know, I never boosted my 2-liter split stop motor. I haven't personal, but just from, you know, my dad's experience and all of his buddies' experience doing that back in the day, that's where they stopped doing what they're supposed to do, and, you know, your block becomes a viewing gallery instead of a block.
But also, if someone out there is looking to get the aftermarket rods and pistons, it's not like they don't exist. They can come to you and get those, and you can get them.
Yeah, I haven't looked in a while because we don't build a whole lot of those. But last I looked, equal rods are still available, and I'm 100% certain about this thing I can make pistons.
Right.
You know, all the pistons we do are built here custom.
Right.
100% custom. And that kind of stems from a COVID thing where you couldn't buy anything, and this guy, him and his son, so they didn't care about COVID.
Okay.
They went into work anyways. And there's only the two of them that live in the same house, so
Yeah.
you know,
How
what's the difference
much
of
COVID
sitting,
could you get? Yeah.
right? You know, what's the difference between sitting here, going to the
Yeah.
shop and punching out some pistons and make some money? So he was able to supply us pistons for COVID, and you know, it's really solid. They're good pistons, and we keep using them. So I know that I can get pistons for them, and I'm pretty sure that you can still get rods in some flavor.
Right. You might not be able to get like aluminum rods or something like that.
Right, and you know that all that stuff's really just a phone call. Like, you know, Sames will make custom rods for me. R&R will make
I
custom
was
rods.
like, R&R
for
will
me.
make them tomorrow.
Yeah, so you know, if there's a will, there's a way.
Right.
But you know, calling up Summit and asking for pistons and rods for these things, you probably won't get very far.
Right. Heck yeah. Did we cover the 11-second one to your satisfaction, or do you want to keep talking about it? Okay. So, Glenn, if you could start all over, thinking back to when you got this bone stock 428 car, would you go through and do it all over again?
Yeah, probably. I'm sure there's some things that I would change along the way.
Yeah.
But in the, you know, looking at my career also as a whole, as a, you know, engine builder, tuner, and stuff like that, but that car played a very instrumental role in my teaching and my learning and stuff like that. And you know, it's a little bit of that you got to pay to play thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I learned everything with my own money on that car. You know, not a sponsored deal or anything
Right.
like that. Like, you know, I got a discount on ECU because I bought it at cost from
Right.
business or whatever. But you know, it's been you know, it's all my labor goes and they help me with it, and it's all stuff that I figured out on my own. So that is very rewarding in that way. And I don't think that, other than a couple minor details along the way, I don't think I really would change much about the way I did that.
So Glenn, this is my favorite question. What does the future look like for this car? Because I know you have some high hopes, some high goals for it.
It changes daily. Usually with the weather. My current goal is to hope that it continues to just drive me to work on nice days. It's
Get you back and forth.
It's I have a nice daily that I take the kids to daycare and stuff like that. But like it's a fun car to drive. We're over 6 miles from the shop, so it's nice to get out. I'll take the 2G.
Yeah.
It'll be a fun little 10-minute drive and stuff like that. But every once in a while, somebody on our Facebook group will start trying to make a fuss or talk. I'm going to go get the record. I'm like, I should just go do that real quick. Like, I know it's not that easy, but like,
it's worth taking a swing for.
I should just, I'll just go to the track. So like a couple weeks ago, we tried and I broke the motor mount and turned out. I'm like, all right. Well, I guess I'm just going to fix the motor mount and I'll just keep driving it around. I haven't been real motivated about going back to the track, but I broke another motor mount testing some traction control stuff for the new firmware that Imtron's coming out with, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to fix this problem of breaking these motor mounts and make one out of steel. And I'm like, all right, cool. Maybe I'll go to the track again. And then, just the weather hasn't cooperated.
Right. So. I think this is the first non-rain week we've had.
Yeah, it's been a little wild around here. All those storms come in from out west or whatever. So it's hot and humid, but at least it's sunny outside.
Yeah, not raining. So let's talk about the goals for this year. I know you still want to get it out some more and do some more testing and do some more development with it and really push the not just what you know and what your abilities are and what the shop's abilities are, but the 420A itself.
Yeah, I think it'll probably wait till after the shootout because, shootout shuffle or something. But I do think that sometime this fall I'll probably get the car out to the track and really start hammering on trying to get the car down the track as fast as I can. Get the weight out of it and get back a little closer to that race car mode. Because, it'll take me a couple hours to get to that point again, and a couple hours to put it back into streetcar trim again. And, if I want to take Taylor Dragon in the spring, I can just put a seat back in it and cruise down the highway. It got 38 miles a gallon this spring going down there, and I couldn't complain about the car. Didn't have a single problem this year compared to a couple years ago in Megasport with Frostburg. Like, had 0 problems this year at all. And, it was just a nice, easy cruise, get cruise control. And
this was a good turnout.
Yeah, it was a good time down there. So I do want to go drag racing with the car and do stuff like that. But I think, it won't be for the sole purpose of getting the record. It'll be more for I'm going to try this feature out because it's easier to test on my car than it is to test on somebody else's car. And, if I break the record doing that, then cool. And if not, that's fine too.
Yeah.
It's, I'd rather sink the money and time into Evo as far as like a drag racing platform. It's all-wheel drive. That's certainly better than front-wheel drive, and I have some other stuff I want to figure out with that we can talk about maybe in a different podcast when I get that one running. But I think as far as the 2G being a drag car, days are a little more numbered.
Okay.
It is something that maybe I'd like to pass down to my son one day or something like that. So, probably not 5 but something that I can keep around for a while. So I don't think putting 15 transmissions in it this year is going to be on the agenda.
Yeah. I think that's fair. So let's talk about your long-term power and quarter mile goals, because I know obviously a lot of people say drag racers don't really care about how much power they make, but this is a learning project for you, not a drag car.
Right. So I think right now the power that it's making is about the most it's ever made. I'm pretty sure that if I put a bigger turbo on it, it would make more, and I'm genuinely curious about that. So that might happen after the shootout too. I might put like one of Tyler's 62 full frames on it or something like that, and just turn it up, see what happens. I have the fuel system for it, and the motor built for it. So
take a swing, yeah.
Take a swing, see what happens. maybe try to beat the 428 dyno record or something. I don't know. But the power and quarter mile goal has really come down from one place under the development stuff. It's
more sort of it happens.
It happens, and it's I'm kind of jaded about the power thing because in a front wheel drive car, in my opinion, anything over 300 horsepower on the street, absolutely. You know, if I roll into it on the street without the traction control stuff that I have now, like it would just be, you know, it just do a mile burnout.
Yeah.
Wouldn't even care.
So you lift your foot off.
Right.
Yeah.
Just spin the tires until something broke or I lift my foot off. So it's kind of not that fun to just swing for the fences with that car.
Yeah.
You know, I've talked to one of my buddies about figuring out doing an all-wheel drive swap on it. And that might be cool. That might be something I try to pursue in a couple of years or something like that. But I think ultimately, in a couple of years, it's probably just going to get a complete restoration, start the back and start over and rewire it again. And then
just become like a pretty car.
Yeah. It's time to turn it back to a pretty car, I think. And, you know, I don't want to retire it. That seems like I'm just not going to ever drive it again.
Right.
I think its purpose in life has changed a little bit. So, not really any goals for this year or next year or anything like that, or any events planned or anything like that. But it's just it's around for me to have fun with. You know, I might drive it and shoot out because it's fun to cruise around it.
Right.
And it's, you know, that seems like it's home. So
you're probably the only 428 turbo there.
I would almost guarantee it.
I would bet a paycheck. So, Glenn, we talked about it a little bit, but I want to talk about if someone out there, they have a 428, maybe they're looking to squeeze a little bit out of it, they're not trying to go for the record or anything like that. What advice would you give them so they could get the most bang for their buck for their 428 car?
The first thing I would absolutely recommend is putting engine in it. You know, stock motor, even on a Mega Sport, I think up 20 horsepower. You know, that's a virtual dyno they're running, but it can be accurate for, you know, tracking changes as long as you keep
Some small things, yeah.
So there's power to be had in just, you know, it's a glorified Dodge Neon. It was built to be an economy car. It wasn't. They put a different ratio transmission in it so that it felt heavier than the Neon, and that's why it's a sports car instead of just a Neon. So it's got the same tune in it and everything. My buddy's been decoding a lot of the factory ECU stuff and has actually made some headway with that. But I don't think that's quite there to be like a tuning support tool. Like he figured out how to get around some emission stuff and stuff like that, turn some stuff off, and that's super neat and promising. But I absolutely think the first thing should be engine management, because then that can grow with the car. And I tell this to a lot of our customers. You know, if you want to make 500 horsepower, you can probably do that on a stock ECU. Do I recommend it? Hardly ever.
Right.
But
definitely
1,000 horsepower or something, you definitely need a standalone. You know, you need those engine safeties. But it's one of those things, if you spend the money when the car makes 200 horsepower to get the standalone in there, it can grow with you to wherever that car is going to go. There's not, you know, a situation where, you know, if you spend the money for the Mega Sport 2 in one of these cars, that in 5 years' time, when you would put a turbo kit on it, that a Mega Sport 2 isn't good enough to do that. You know, it's same ECU. It'll be plenty fine at doing that. Your options come down to what else you want the ECU to do. So, you know, you spend the money now to put an Entron on it, then you want to go make a whole bunch of power and have good power management and stuff like that. Then it'll grow with you. Or the other thing too, you know, if you go and buy a turbo kit for this car, you're taking money into that and hoping that the stock ECU will work, and you're going to blow it up and all this stuff. And then that turbo kit's specifically for that car. The turbo might be able to be used on something else, but that turbo kit's specifically for that car. You're taking a bunch of cost into that. But if you go put an ECU in the car and total it, you can take the ECU out and put it in your next project.
Yeah.
So,
resell it,
yeah, so it's a little bit more of a, you know, upfront investment, but I think that it's a better investment for building upon than, you know, I got this car, I'm going to put turbo kit on it.
Right.
You know, hope for the best.
So I think a lot of the problem is people don't understand how affordable they are these days.
Yeah, and, you know, the Mega Sport stuff is still the cheapest ECU on the market. You know, and that's a little bit built to the price point. You know, the Entron stuff is more like Motec in capability and stuff, but not from a tech price. But you get what you pay for a little bit there, but they're both worth their weight in gold compared to the stock.
Right.
So, I think that's the biggest thing, and I try to pound that into all of our unit and customers. That it's like, sure, somebody can flash the stock ECU here, it'll probably work, but what happens when you use fuel pressure? Stock ECU isn't looking at that, doesn't care. It's going to lean out and blow the converter, you just pay 10 grand for it. So,
I think, for the fail-safes alone, it's worth the price.
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing by far.
All right, Glenn, so we know this is kind of your first Mitsubishi that you've owned, but you obviously have the Evo too. We'll save that for a future episode. But I want to talk about your background with Mitsubishi cars, because it's not just, we could say that the 428 is not Mitsubishi, but obviously your fingers on the pulse of all the Mitsubishi engines.
It says Mitsubishi right there on the
on the valve cover.
Yeah, it's a Mitsubishi as far as I'm concerned. The 428 is kind of really unique. Is the head's not even Chrysler designed. It was designed by Lotus, and it's this whole melting pot of stuff that came together to be the 428 Eclipse. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But like I said, I got into it because my dad was into it with a 428 Eclipse, and then he bought an Evo, and then he bought a 1G, and then he bought a Galant, and then he bought another 1G because the Galant was rusty, and we swapped everything over, and he's been into it for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
So before he had the Evos and stuff, he had first gen Camaros, and he really did this, and he road raced motorcycles and stuff like that. So I was really doomed from the start, but in building the motor for my car and stuff like that, I met some people and started helping out at the local machine shop and stuff like that, and kind of just put myself in situations where I could learn more about stuff, and ended up for a brief period of time working for Busher, and I probably built 140 53 when I was there, maybe more.
Yeah.
And we were on for a while the bleeding edge of what people were doing with it.
Yeah,
and it just it kind of turned into a putting myself into the position to meet people, to align myself with what I wanted to do ultimately, which is where we're at now.
Yeah.
Now I feel like we're at the bleeding edge of 4B11 stuff, and I don't think I would be here without that car. So
we're still on the. Let's not get it confused. If you have a 4G, this is still a place to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd argue that I've built pretty close to more than anybody in the country. At least at one point in time, that was definitely the truth. There was a time where Ryan and I were working together, and we built 60 motors in 30 days. So I'm very familiar with both platforms. My Evo in its last setup iteration, it made 850 horsepower, and the shop Evo 10 makes about 1,000.
Yeah.
With its last setup on it, and a lot of the stuff applies between all the motors. They're all very similar, but it kind of applies to all motors.
Right.
There are very key differences in a couple of them, but a 4B11 is very similar in bore and stroke to a 2JZ. And a 4053 is very similar in a lot of dimensions, bore spacing and rod length and stuff like that, to a 4.6 liter mod motor. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of transfers over to the other stuff that we work on here that, oh, cool, we're doing this thing with this mod motor that makes a lot of sense and works really well there. I wonder if that can apply back to the 4053. In most cases, it can't. So kind of grabbing from some other stuff that I've worked on, from Hemis and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of little tips and tricks that you learn with some of that stuff, and that definitely applies to what we're working on. Even with a little four-cylinder, our neighbors came from tractor pullers.
I was going to say, it should be noted that you guys also build 4,000 horsepower Pro Mod tractor pulling.
Yeah, so we put a fuel tech on one of those, and we learned a lot about methanol tuning and stuff like that, and different. It's a completely different kind of racing, so they require a completely different set of parameters to get this thing to go down and pull this 40,000 pound sled, and it all applies. The way that they seal a head gasket up on those things to make 5,000 horsepower on a 500 cubic inches and 140 pounds of boost is really good. And we took that technology and applied it to what we're doing with the Formula 11 stuff. And we haven't had a single head gasket problem all year last year because of that. So, it's grabbing stuff that works from other places and trying to apply it to what we're good at here,
Right.
for some of the stuff. And I think that's what it takes to be innovative and stuff. That's how we've gotten to where we are with all the platforms.
Right. That's why there's mountains of blocks back there that you guys are putting together.
Yeah, it's a little silly.
Well, I mean, people know where to come.
Right.
So, Glenn, I know you said that the 428 might make an outing to the shootout and that you don't really plan to take it to any other events, but what events can people come and find you at to ask questions about their engine or maybe even their 428 powered car?
Really, any of the events that we plan on taking the shop cars to, there'll be the shootout. We might make a couple ISO events with Ryan's car and Adam's car, and I'll kind of be around at all of those, supporting stuff. But really like the Evo Day at Yellow Dragon and events like that. That's really where if you want to see the car and stuff like that, that's the best place to pick that car. So, I'm not going to take my Evo down to Evo Day or Dragon Day or whatever because, that sounds terrible on forced lakes and manual brakes and
Right.
no power steering. That's not what the car is built to do, but I can definitely take the Judy down on a road trip and enjoy it all weekend. So that's what I
Right
do.
there and back.
Yeah.
So, Glenn, I wanted to make sure that everybody knows the social medias and even the website where people can come and, maybe if they're interested in having their 428 built or they're interested in asking you some questions, they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so I think all of the social media is just Excellent Solutions. Facebook, Instagram, maybe TikTok. I don't know. And then the website is exigent-solutions.com.
And it should be noted that if someone messages the business page, they'll be talking to you or Ryan or Adam. It's not like they're talking to.
Right. There's just three of us here, so we all see the messages and we all take part in trying to talk to the customers and stuff like that. So in between getting work done and stuff. So we might not respond in 38 seconds, but
Right.
one of us will certainly be back to you.
So if someone's looking to talk to you specifically, they can do it.
Right, and if you message the page and schedule a time for a phone call, instead of leaving me a voicemail that I might not ever check.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Or somebody else will check and forget to tell me to call the guy back, or it's we're busy around here, the
Right.
three of us, and
You're without a person in front right now, so
right,
it's more difficult than normal.
So yeah, we have the phone and if it rings and I'm underneath the car holding the transmission, so Adam can start a bolt or something like that, and then there's nobody to run up and answer the phone, if Brian's helping too or something like that. So it's sometimes that's a little rough, but Facebook's definitely our preferred method.
Okay. So, Glenn, I always give people a chance to give a shout out to anybody who's helped them get where they are, get with their car where it is. I know you probably got a lot of people that have helped you out along the way. Does anybody you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I guess, my dad and everybody that he met through GGNT.com, those guys have been super, super helpful in getting me kind of jump started with that car. And then, obviously Ryan and Adam for helping with day-to-day stuff.
Right.
Moving the business along and, allowing me the freedom to develop stuff and stuff like that. So, I think all those guys definitely deserve a shout out for getting me where I am.
Like, yeah. All right. Well, Glenn, I think one part that I did want to hit on, the 428 list wouldn't even be a list on MitsuTimes if it wasn't for you, your previous employer. You talked them into sponsoring it.
Yeah.
It became a list, and it's been there ever since. So I want to say thank you, all the 428 guys. Thank you for sticking your neck out there, and now it's a list.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted there to, there was not really a great place that had that stuff written down somewhere, and me and a couple other guys were starting to swing for the fences on it, and having all that information in one place was really handy. And I don't think that there's a single week that goes by that we don't use your website to bench race. So we're sitting there, this guy's 60 foot a little bit better than us. We got to figure that out. So
That's what it's all about.
it's a great platform for comparing data, and I'm a very data oriented person with the tuning and all that stuff. So if there's some data, I like to look at it.
Yeah, me too. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for coming on here. Thank you for inviting me out here. It's been awesome. I hope that we can inspire some more 428 guys. I was just checking. There's 16 people on the list right now. So, if you're out there and you have a nearly bone stock 428, take it out to the track, do some rips in it, call Glenn up, get some parts for it, and let's get you on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be curious just to see when it's been stock on the list too, just for the data.
See what it does, yeah.
It's always fun, especially on the Evo 10 list, to compare setups and what people want and look at, this is a similar setup that we know of, and this is, that's where you're going to end up.
Yeah.
So
I think it's always cool to see fuel types. Same turbo, ethanol, same turbo, pump gas.
Oh, yeah.
What a difference.
Yeah, and that's something that I've had a lot of fun with playing with over time. Do a lot of stuff with cars on stock ECU, and I'll do the full pump gas kit. I'll be like, all right, cool, this is ready to go in pump gas, and then I'll put ethanol in it, and I'll be like, just for fun, here's the same timing table and the same boost curve, and it'll pick up 40 to 50 horsepower every time.
Yeah.
So
crazy that what's crazy to me is that the Canadians don't have ethanol options. So
right.
They're really stuck.
Right. We had a guy that wanted to build a car from Canada, and we were like, oh, yeah, we can hit your power goals, no problem with ethanol. And he's like, so I should probably tell you. We're like, oh, that's okay.
Man.
We'll try.
They're getting hurt.
Yeah.
But Glenn, thank you so much, man. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.